When Saul marched forth with his army, he cautioned, God will test you with a river. So whoever drinks his fill from it is not with me, and whoever does not taste it except a sip from the hollow of his hands is definitely with me. They all drank their fill except for a few. When he and the remaining faithful with him crossed the river, they said, now we are no match for Goliath and his warriors. But those believers who were certain they would meet God reasoned, how many times has a small force vanquished a mighty army by the will of God? And God is always with the steadfast. When they advanced to face Goliath and his warriors, they prayed, our Lord, shower us with perseverance, make our steps firm, and give us victory over the disbelieving people. So they defeated them by God's will, and David killed Goliath. And God blessed David with kingship and wisdom and taught him what he willed.
That's good.
All right, so
yeah, go ahead.
My reaction to that, well, one thing that immediately comes to mind is a conflation of certain historical figures with other historical figures, or certain events with other events. So in this case, what immediately pops to mind is the confusion of what Saul did in order to ferret out from his army those who should go with him and those who shouldn't. It confuses it with the incident with Gideon. Gideon is the one who actually did this according to the biblical text. So there's that, but another interesting thing to me about this is that here we have in the Qur'an an endorsement of the wars that were fought by the Israelites under their kings at the behest of God, because sometimes Muslims will use this as an argument against biblical religion. How could they do some of the things they did? They bring up 1 Samuel 15, texts like this. But here you have in the Quran mention of the wars under Saul, even though confused, and David, and that sort of thing. There also is some bit of conflation going on here with what happened in this incident of David versus Goliath. The whole point of David confronting Goliath was this was going to settle the contest between them at this point. This would negate the need for a wide-scale battle, and David besting Goliath in battle ended the matter between them, at least at that moment in history. But here it seems to be part of a big war that's taking place. So not only does David slay Goliath, but in addition to that, Saul routs their contingent, their army. Right.
Let's go for Surah 28.
Surah 28.
And verse 23 all the way to 29.
Okay, Surah 28.
Verse 23, start and end 29.
Okay. When he arrived at the well of Midian,
That's
he found...
Moses, by the way. It's Moses.
When he arrived at the well of Midian, he found a group of people watering their herds. Apart from them, he noticed two women holding back their herd. He asked them, what is the problem? They replied, we cannot water our animals until the other shepherds are done, for our father is a very old man. So he watered their herd for them, then withdrew to the shade and prayed, my Lord, I am truly in desperate need of water, or whatever provision you may have in store for me. Then one of the two women came to him, walking bashfully. She said, my father is inviting you so he may reward you for watering our animals for us. When Moses came to him and told him his whole story, the old man said, have no fear, you are now safe from the wrongdoing people. One of the two daughters suggested, oh my dear father, hire him, the best man for employment is definitely the strong and trustworthy one. The old man proposed, I wish to marry one of these two daughters of mine to you, provided that you stay in my service for 8 years. If you complete 10, it will be a favor from you, but I do not wish to make it difficult for you. God willing, you will find me an agreeable man. Moses responded, then it is settled between you and I. Whichever term I fulfill, there will be no further obligation on me, and God is a witness to what we say. When Moses had completed the term and was traveling with his family, he spotted a fire on the side of Mount Tur. He said to his family, stay here, for I have spotted a fire, and so forth. So again, what we have here is a attempt to recount something that happened in the life of Moses, but it's confused with something that happened earlier in the life of his ascendant, Jacob, much earlier, in fact. So Jacob, in the biblical account in the book of Genesis, which is a long time before Moses was even born, Jacob is the one who goes to a foreign area and begins to work for Laban for his daughters. By the way, it gets the number of years wrong. It's 7 years that he's supposed to work for his daughter. But the whole thing is confused. It's confusing the incident that happened with Jacob with what happened with Moses. And part of this would be that Moses, or Muhammad, is hearing these things being recited in his oral culture, and he doesn't necessarily hear the chronology. These things are not all being given in one swoop, and so he's hearing this story here, that story there, and some of these stories are similar in some respects. So Moses is in the wilderness. Moses does have encounters with sheep and shepherds and wells and that sort of thing. And so Muhammad hearing this, but not knowing the chronology and having everything well ordered in his mind, ends up confusing stories that have some points of similarity to each other and just conflates them. So this sort of thing could easily happen.
Did you notice also the difference in number of daughters?
Oh, 2 daughters, yes.
How many daughters in the story of Moses and Exodus?
Yeah, so 1. Are you thinking of
7?
Yeah, oh, so you're thinking, okay.
Jethro's daughters.
Yes, yes.
7
So
daughters.
you can say it's no doubt that Muhammad was author of the Quran, because only unlettered man could compose such a mishmash.
Indeed, indeed. He certainly had a hand in the whole process.
Right.
Maybe Surah 12:67.
Okay.
Oh, that's a great one.
Okay, just that verse?
Yeah.
Okay, Surah 12:67. He then instructed them, O my sons, do not enter the city all through one gate, but through separate gates. I cannot help you against what is destined by God in the least. It is only God who decides. In him I put my trust, and in him let the faithful put their trust. So here, it's saying something occurred in the case of Jacob's sons that's never mentioned in the Bible. They're not told to enter in through 12 gates.
Or any gate.
The number of possible things that Muhammad could have been referring to are of various sorts, but what most immediately comes to my mind is mentioned in the book of Revelation about 12 gates, 12 foundations, and so forth.
wanna
That's not
give
the
you-
only possibility, but my point is that you do have mention elsewhere of 12 gates.
Not 12 gates. No, it's not number of gates. It's just. Do you think what was the reason for Jacob to caution his sons not to enter from one gate? What was the reason? Any idea?
According to the Quran?
Yeah.
Yeah, in this particular gate, or in this particular case, I'm not sure I understand or know the.
I won't know.
the
I won't
Mormon
guess.
Or the
No way you
Muslim.
could know, just
I just
by
talked to
looking
some
at it.
Mormons, so they're on my mind. But yeah, so there's a lot in the Quran. I'm sure they have some account of this, but there's a lot in the Quran where you read it. If you were asked what's the background of this, you'd never guess what the sources actually
so
say.
this is from Louis Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews.
Okay. And as he knew that they were likely to attract attention on account of their heroic stature and handsome appearance, he cautioned them against going to the city altogether through the same gate, or indeed showing themselves altogether anywhere in public, that the evil eye be not cast upon them. Okay, so they're all fair, good-looking, and
right.
all of them together.
That's
would-
Midrash.
Okay.
It's superstitious,
So,
right?
Very interesting, yeah. And that's not surprising, because much in the Quran is, again, this goes back to what I was saying before, where Muhammad's hearing oral recitations of the Bible and he's conflating things, but in addition, he's hearing other stories that are being told by the Jews, and he doesn't know the difference between biblical recitation and Talmudic fables, midrashic tales. And the Jews, in many cases, didn't think all these stories were literal. Sometimes they just thought they were illustrative of some moral point or principle. Though they did, of course, invent certain stories and did give them credence. But the point is, Muhammad didn't know the difference between the biblical accounts, when those were being recited, these Talmudic tales and other fables of the Jews.
The last two verses, Surah 25, 4 and 5.
Last 2 verses of Surah 25.
Yep. verses 4 and 5.
Wait, what?
4 and
Surah
5.
25, 4 and 5.
Oh, okay. The disbelievers say, this Qur'an is nothing but a fabrication which he made up with the help of others. Their claim is totally unjustified and untrue. And they say these revelations are only ancient fables which he has had written down, and they are rehearsed to him morning and evening.
Even they cut it. They knew it was
Yeah, so
Legends of the Jews.
So the interesting thing is, this shows us what the response was of Muhammad's contemporaries. One of the things that we're usually presented with by Muslims is this idea that people were overawed with the Quran. The fact of the matter is, by the Quran's own testimony, it's telling on itself, it unwittingly or tacitly indicates, no, that's not true. The pagans around Muhammad were immediately responding to this, saying, we've heard this sort of thing before. This is just fables that our fathers have told, or that were told to us in our hearing. And Muhammad's saying, no, they're not. But as we've just seen in numerous instances, that's exactly what these things are. If you ever read something in the Quran that's being ascribed to the prophets and you don't know it, you can be sure that if you look in Jewish sources or ancient pagan sources, you're probably going to find it there, if it's been preserved. Because, in fact, these were fables. The people were responding exactly the way we normally respond, right? You had me read these things at random, and I naturally am saying, you know, this isn't how it happened in the Bible, this is confusing things.
It's so obvious.
On the way over here, I was actually thinking of one of the mistakes that's found in the Quran, which is the idea that Abraham was cast into a fire. This is actually a corruption, a biblical word for Ur of the Chaldees, could be read as fire, and some later Jews did, and so when it talks about Abraham coming from Ur of the Chaldees, they took it as him being taken out of the fire. And this is just a Jewish fable. It's based on a poor reading of the text. And Muhammad picks this up as though it's the actual teaching of the text. So this sort of thing is rampant in the Quran.
Oh, thank you very much.